Hi, this is Linda Smith from Farm Journal and Top Producer. I've got Jerry Gulke here going to talk with us about the closes this week. And I'd like to start out by asking Jerry, why is it that wheat was up almost 50 cents this week and a much higher percentage? It's at 9% of last week's price, whereas corn and beans were up, corn about 12 cents and beans in the 26 to 31 cent range. They're about 3% of what last prices were. Why would that be?
I think one main reason is that, and we talked about this over, the months, I guess, is that I called it the dog of the commodities, the wheat. We got 1 billion bushels of wheat for the next 2 years as far as the eye can see, and what we needed to do is some major exporter needed to have a crop problem, and that we probably couldn't eat our way out of it or couldn't feed our way out of it to animals. We just needed to have a major problem somewhere, and that's what, that it kind of started with the June 30th acres report, because that was mainly for the pique the corn interest. But then we started to find out that suddenly we've got some poor quality wheat here, and then here comes Russia, and I don't know where all the guys were in the Russian thing, but we've got that heat wave over there that this year's crop was last year's crop was less than the previous year, and this year they're thinking it could be half of what it was last year, and this is where that 70-mile-an-hour winds and heat just burns that stuff to the ground, and that's what got interest in Europe. And what we saw happening was first the global wheat traders, and I guess for lack of a better word, the Bungies, the Dreyfus, the Cargills, that they were all short a lot of wheat, and we tracked that every week with the spec positions, and the guys, even the large spec and everybody you can think of, wanted to be short wheat because it just isn't going to work, and the only way you're going to make any money is store it and gain that $2 every 2 years or whatever, and suddenly we got the bottoms falling out of the world wheat crop. It's not only bad in Russia and Ukraine, but they have problems in the EU, in France and Germany, and also in Hungary, where we have some contacts, as you know, that now there's crops in New Zealand's not looking so hot, and then you go over to Canada, kind of where it all started, and you got less wheat over there because of rain. And in our conference in Colorado, Mark Russo mentioned the fact that when you go from a El Nino to a La Nina, or vice versa, from winter to summer, in that transition period, you get some very erratic, volatile weather patterns, even within a country. And you can see this in China, the United States, Canada, rain in one spot, not enough rain in another, not uniform one way or the other. And we're seeing this around the world now. So I think, and from what the reports are saying, is that we caught a lot of these people short. And it's kind of funny because I tell people, thank goodness we have gray hair because we've been here and done this. You got a lot of young guys in the trade now who have never gone through the 74, period when Russia had a bad crop and we sold them all our wheat because of the same kind of weather pattern. It was a disaster, and we sold them all our stored wheat that we had. And suddenly, the only ones around that are the guys that are in their 60s that remember that. And you got a lot of young traders that say, boy, we got on a roll now. Even some that work for merchandisers saying, we're going to short the wheat. We're also going to sell wheat that we have in the bin or that we think we're going to buy from Jerry in June or July, and he'll dump it. And we're going to buy it cheap, wide basis, and so forth. And we'll cover it when and if we feel like it. Suddenly you got a guy that sold it short cash, we'll call it. In other words, he sold the cash to, say, Egypt for maybe $160 a ton. And he's short on the board, too, and I think he's going to make even more. Greed sets in no matter which side of the equation we're on. And suddenly he finds himself wanting to get out, and nobody in their right mind would sell wheat when they know what's coming in the worldwide situation, especially as cheap as it got. So they were falling all over each other. They started buying wheat in the European market and then trying to buy it in the U.S. market, and that's what caused that 40-cent move, and the 30-cent moves, and 20-cent moves. I think they might all be out, or they were waiting like I was today. Actually sold a little wheat yesterday because I thought, well, Friday it might go down, and I didn't think it'd go down more than 5 or 6 cents. It was down to 14 at one time today. So that's what you really got. You got guys leaning the wrong way. Fundamentals haven't changed much, and I think we have to remain that way for the short term. There's a lot of wheat in Russia. There was a lot of wheat in Canada. Canadian Wheat Board has got wheat. We can meet this year's supply, and they may have to come and demand. They may have to come from the United States to get some. But I think what it does, it will put a critical shortage on feed wheat. And we want to watch China because they like to buy feed wheat because it's cheap. If they don't get, not China, South Korea, if they buy South Korea turns around and has to buy corn from the U.S. or Argentina or anybody, that will give us a signal that they're just not getting their hands on the feed wheat. And so, in essence, the lack of enough feed wheat out there that may now be needed for food all the way through next year, and then get some people enticed to plant wheat so that we have a cushion again in 2011. So this is all about shorts getting out, guys leaning the wrong way, and it's just fun to see it happen because if you're setting out a lot of wheat or it didn't have much sold at these cheap prices, then somebody's going to pay you for it. Now the basis is good and the price has gone up $1.20. We did take wheat back up close to the highs that we had in January. That was a critical time frame when we had the last blockbuster crop report. So we've taken wheat up that high. Minneapolis wheat has blown right through it. So we want to look at all wheat and see that some of them exceeded this year's high, some have not. And a lot of traders look at that and say, I'm selling against this year's high. And next week will be kind of critical because if they can't get wheat bought at a reasonable price, then the more guys are going to have to cover. So, but what it did do for us, it gave us an opportunity to sell wheat that we never thought we'd be able to sell, a good carry. So if you've got any wheat left over from last year or this year's wheat, take a look and see what December is paying and what March of next year and what July of next year, 2011, and say to yourself, I maybe make more money storing wheat than I can, of course, storing soybeans. And if I can make 40 or 50 or 60 cents or $1 a bushel storing wheat, that's like making like having room to store your wheat and selling beans instead and saying that's like getting $1 a bushel more for my beans. I can lock it in wheat. And it's all a matter of what dollars you store in what bushels. So that's kind of it in the long form of it. But it's a pretty complicated situation, especially since the CFTC wanted to go through this thing and get the cash price narrowing up with futures. And lo and behold, the perfect storm came. Poor crops around the world, not the United States. We get the benefit for a change, and the buyer ends up caught short.